What is up, everybody? We have a little bit of news with the ongoing Stephen Sharif, Intrepid Studios, TFE Games, Dawson, Ogden, Karamanis, and the whole crew stuff that is happening. Actually, Karamanis is not part of this, but we do have a little bit of an update tonight. Nothing huge or major. Today was the preliminary injunction hearing in the Nevada case. So where we're at with all of this, many of you may remember, but we'll go back over it. TFE Games filed for a temporary restraining order in Nevada several days ago, and it was approved. They were basically arguing that Stephen Sharif and John Moore were withholding vital information, passwords, record keeping books and things that they needed in order to close out Intrepid Studios. And that was granted. However, it was granted with what was called status quo. So Stephen essentially agreed to maintain status quo during this process. And a hearing was then set for today for a preliminary injunction, which would have continued this process, made it a much more in-depth issue. However, over that time period that all of this has been happening, we also have Stephen Sharif in a California federal court was granted a TRO of his own against Dawson et al. And TFE Games Holdings, basically saying that if he gives over this information, that essentially the IP Intrepid becomes worthless. And at the core of this was the possibility that this Article 9 foreclosure was done improperly or illegally or whatever it might be. And so the argument was we need to solve that first, and whether or not I'm actually there's a whole host of other things. For example, a resident of Nevada or having dealings in Nevada in order to even be a part of this ongoing suit in there. And so this was all presented to a federal judge who also granted a TRO for Stephen, basically saying that none of the other group, Dawson or any of them, could have access to these records or do anything with the IP or any of it until another hearing was held. And also with that order actually was a custodian will be appointed to maintain those records, kind of independent of everyone. As you can imagine, those are sort of two competing TROs. They are not. They do not work together. They go against each other. So, what we got today was essentially the judge in the Nevada case saying that they're just going to maintain status quo for now. Now, I do not have the minutes for this just yet. It has not posted to their website, and I didn't want to wait any longer. However, Stephen did apparently make a comment in Discord where he stated that today in Nevada, the court did not grant TFE's requested injunction and instead continued the hearing until March 27th after the federal court hearing in San Diego. He also added, signaling that the Nevada court intends to consider the federal proceedings before issuing a ruling, which is probably accurate. And so what's going on in California? What's that about? Well, after this TRO was filed in favor of Stephen Sharif in California, Dawson and his lawyers filed a motion to dissolve the temporary restraining order, basically to get rid of it. And have now also filed what's called an order shortening time, basically trying to speed this process up, stating that, they have an ongoing competing issue in Nevada. Anyways, that was granted. So they have changed kind of the process of what was going to happen in California. And it says the court grants TFE's ex parte application to shorten time on its motion to dissolve the TRO. So essentially what was going to be a preliminary injunction hearing for the California case on March 18th has now been turned into a hearing on this motion to potentially dissolve the TRO. And so what we got from that today, the plaintiff, Stephen, has to respond by March 11th, which is in 2 days. And then after that, TFE's reply is due the next day on the 12th, and then they'll have this hearing on the 18th. And that will kind of really sort of, I think, tell us what's going to happen here. What does this judge decide in the California case? If they decide to dissolve the TRO, then I think what we see on the 27th in the Nevada case is, potentially granting a preliminary injunction there as well. So, this is kind of where we're at. A lot of little, well, maybe not little, but a lot of legal maneuverings are happening. And so I just, as always, wanted to keep you up to date. And I might go into a little bit more detail in a more scripted video later about some of the arguments here. I also have some interest in going over. We now have, I have 2 different investor presentations. Maybe show you all that as well. But a little bit of news tonight. Like I said, we're potentially going to get some bigger news. However, at this stage, the Nevada court has decided to maintain status quo, basically postpone any sort of hearing or judgment until after this California case potentially gets some closure. If not, I also could point out, maybe the judge in California does not dissolve the TRO. Then what do they do in Nevada? I have no idea. Things get a lot more messy. So as always, keep following me, subscribe if you're interested. I know a lot of you might be burning out, so I'm really trying hard not to do more than 1 video a week on this and add in some other stuff. So if you like games, which is why we're all here, you might hang out with me live or watch some of the stuff I put out there as well. But anyways, it's been real, y'all. I hope you have a good Monday night.